all of you, start with something easy. Don't take the issue, that's your word. Don't take, sometimes you'll say, I've got this issue that I have a challenge with. And just those words are a really strong indicator of how you're feeling about it. I've got this, I'm struggling. This is what I'm struggling with. And we want to just lighten the struggle. And so we'll say, let's talk about something lighter. We were having a conversation with a woman on a telephone many years ago when Esther was still had time to do that. And this woman was not having any of us. She wanted a psychic prediction. She wanted us just to give her psychic predictions of what was coming, and she did not want to learn how to create her own reality at all. And so she was not enjoying us. And we weren't getting anywhere with her. And so we said to her, let's talk about some things that you do not have so much resistance about. She said, why? We said, because it will feel better to you. And she said, all right. And so, like what? She said. And we said, well, let's talk about blue glass. And she said, why? We said, because you don't think about that very often. And she said, there's a reason for that. And we said, well, let's just talk about blue glass just for a little bit. Let's talk about how many varieties of the color blue there are and how the textures of glass vary so much. You can see right through some, and some are so opaque you can't see through it all. Some let light through. So many different varieties of blue glass. Blah, 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 she's thinking. She's having none of it. So then we said, well, then let's talk about butterflies. Why? Because you don't think much about butterflies. Butterflies, the variety of butterflies. We talked about butterflies for a minute or so. And then we said, let's talk about feathers. She was having none of this and actually did end the conversation abruptly by hanging up. Jerry and Esther were in San Diego at the time. They were in La Jolla. And so they went over to George's to have lunch. And they parked the car at the La Valencia Hotel, and they were walking down the sidewalk to George's. And all of a sudden, Esther felt an impulse that she couldn't deny that was so powerful. She wanted to go inside this shop. Now, that in and of itself is not unusual for Esther. But her feeling was so strong that and Jerry did not want to go, which was not unusual for Jerry. But she dragged him in, and they got all the way to the back wall, and there was the most amazing wall of blue glass ever anywhere. Ceiling to floor, wall to wall, all kinds of different blue glass. Esther did not make the association, and Jerry had not been part of the conversation, and so he did not either. And so they were not interested in blue glass, and so they went on their way to lunch and had lunch, and they came out of the restaurant and they walked down to what's called the Cove, the most beautiful rocks and the most beautiful sea. And as they were walking across this long lawned area, they were surrounded by a flurry of butterflies that was so intense they had to stop talking, which was not like them, in order to not eat butterflies. Still, Esther did not make any association with the conversation that had been an hour or so before. And then all of a sudden, Jerry said, look at that. And there's a little boy, a little Asian boy, 3 years old, 4 maybe, running toward them, as if he knew them. And Esther looked at him, and this little one came right up to Esther and handed her a feather. And then Esther realized what had happened. Because those 3 subjects had been activated with no resistance, the universe found a way to deliver them all in an amazingly short period of time and in a very obvious way. This is what we want you to understand about all things. But see, those subjects there was no resistance within Esther about them at all. But they were active in her vibration because of the conversation. So what we're saying to you is, if you will test the universe with things that you do not have big wads of resistance about, just find some thoughts and simply offer them and watch how quickly law of attraction responds to the power of the frequency of your offering. You will discover your power. And then little by little, you can take subjects that are all wadded up within you, that you've practiced a lot of resistance about, and you can soften the resistance about those subjects by becoming less and less specific and more general.